The desert is silent, but for the wind sweeping across an ocean of golden sand. The sun burns mercilessly, the same sun that has risen and set over this land for thousands of years. Out of the horizon, 3 titans rise, shapes too precise, too immense, too deliberate to be natural. The pyramids of Giza. They dominate the skyline, even after 4.5 millennia. They are monuments not only of stone, but of will, power, and belief. And yet, their very existence still whispers a question that has never been fully silenced. How and why were they built? To understand the secret of these colossal structures, one must step back into the world that gave birth to them. It is the 4th dynasty of Egypt, around 2600 BCE. Egypt is not merely a land. It is a kingdom defined by the Nile, its waters slicing through desert like a ribbon of life. Each year, the river floods, depositing rich black silt that allows crops to flourish. Without the Nile, there would be no Egypt. And without the pharaoh, there would be no order. For the pharaoh is not simply a king. He is a god upon the earth, Horus in human form, the mediator between heaven and the people. The pyramids, though silent today, were born from this belief in divine kingship and eternal afterlife. To the Egyptians, death was not an end but a passage, and the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife was of cosmic importance. If he was to rise again and join the gods, the entire universe remained in balance. If he failed, chaos itself could swallow the world. This is why the tomb of the pharaoh was no mere resting place. It was a vessel of immortality. The story begins with Pharaoh Sneferu, the father of Khufu, who would build the Great Pyramid itself. Sneferu was a visionary, restless in his ambition. He ordered not 1, but 3 great pyramids during his reign. The first at Mitam collapsed in disaster. His second, the bent pyramid at Dashur, changed angle midway through construction, an experiment in engineering that revealed both error and innovation. His third, the Red Pyramid, rose successfully, its limestone surface glowing crimson in the desert sun. Sneferu's architects had learned. They had tested stone in slope, weight, and balance. By the end of his reign, they had perfected the geometry that would make the Great Pyramid possible. It was a trial and error of a single generation that laid the foundation for one of humanity's greatest achievements. And so came Khufu, the son of Sneferu. History remembers him as both brilliant and ruthless. The ancient historian Herodotus, writing 2,000 years later, portrayed him as a tyrant who closed temples, forced his people into labor, and exploited thousands. But Egyptian records, sparse yet telling, paint a subtler picture. He was a ruler of immense authority, commanding resources across a unified land. He was feared, but he was respected, and under his reign, Egypt reached new heights of power. It was Khufu who would demand the impossible, a pyramid greater than all others, a structure so vast it would defy time itself. To achieve this, Khufu summoned the best minds of Egypt, the architects, engineers, and scribes. Among them was Himeyinu, his vizier and cousin, who would oversee the project. It was Himeyinu who coordinated tens of thousands of workers, planned the quarrying of limestone, the transport of granite blocks from Aswan 600 miles away, and the precise alignment of the pyramid with the cardinal points of the compass. Nothing was left to chance. Even the base of the pyramid was leveled with such accuracy that modern engineers, with all their tools, stand in awe. At each step, mathematics, astronomy, and labor converge into something approaching the miraculous. But what of the workers themselves? For centuries, myth spoke of slaves toiling under the whip, chained and broken in endless suffering. This image, dramatic though it is not true. Archaeological discoveries around Giza, workers' villages, bakeries, breweries, and cemeteries, tell another story. The builders of pyramids were not slaves, but skilled laborers recruited from across Egypt. Farmers, during the season when the Nile flooded their fields and left them idle, took part in the construction. They were housed, fed, even honored for their service to Pharaoh. Their bones reveal the marks of hard labor, but also of medical care and decent nutrition. These men and women believed they were serving not only their ruler, but the gods themselves, securing their own place in eternity. Still, the scale was staggering. The Great Pyramid would rise to nearly 500 feet, composed of over 2.3 million blocks of stone. Each block weighed, on average, 2.5 tons. Some, hauled from Aswan, weighed up to 80 tons. The logistics alone boggled the mind. Ramps were built, vast causeways of mud brick and limestone, up which workers dragged sledges lubricated with water to reduce friction. Teams coordinated in rhythm, pulling in unison, sweat pouring under the desert sun. The sound of chisels echoed in the quarries, hammers striking copper against stone. Dust filled the air, and songs rose from the workers' lips to keep their steps aligned. Every detail mattered. The corners of the pyramid pointed exactly to the 4 cardinal directions, with an accuracy within fractions of a degree. This was no accident. The Egyptians studied the stars, watching eternal cycles above. The pyramid was aligned to the heavens, a reflection of cosmic order on earth. The shafts inside the pyramid pointed toward constellations sacred to Egyptian belief. The belt of Orion, associated with Osiris, god of the afterlife, and the star Sirius, linked to Isis. The pyramid was not only a tomb, but a map of the heavens, a machine for eternity. And yet, within this triumph of stone and spirit, a tension brewed. Khufu's reign was long, but the resources poured into his pyramid strained Egypt. The sheer manpower, the diversion of food and supplies, the labor drawn from every corner of the kingdom. It created resentment among the people. Later generations remembered him not as a benevolent god-king, but as a harsh ruler who demanded too much. The Great Pyramid stood as his immortality, but also as a symbol of the cost borne by his subjects. This duality, the glory and the burden, echoes still across the desert sands. As the pyramid neared completion, its smooth white casing stones of polished Tural limestone gleamed in the sun, reflecting light so powerfully it could be seen for miles. To the ancient Egyptians, it was a stairway of light, a beacon guiding the soul of the pharaoh into the sky. At its apex lay the Benben stone, the sacred pyramid ion, gilded to shine like the sun itself. Within, hidden deep in the core, the burial chamber awaited, lined with granite blocks so massive that even today, engineers struggle to imagine how they were raised into place. The sarcophagus, carved from a single block of red granite, stood ready to receive the god-king. But then, a mystery unfolded, one that still haunts historians. When modern explorers entered the Great Pyramid, they found the burial chamber empty. No mummy of Khufu has ever been discovered. Was his body stolen in antiquity, the victim of grave robbers who sought the treasures once buried with him? Or was his burial never completed, lost to time and turmoil? The absence of his remains only deepens the enigma. The pyramid endures, but the king himself is missing, a ghost in the heart of his own monument. Yet Khufu's death did not end the age of pyramids. His successors, Khafre and Menkaure, built their own colossal tombs beside his, forming the triad that still stands at Giza. Khafre's pyramid, slightly smaller but still imposing, retains fragments of its original casing near the top, a reminder of how all three once shone like celestial mountains. Menkaure's, though more modest, was once sheathed in granite, a costly and symbolic choice. Together, they formed an necropolis unlike any other, watched over by the great Sphinx, whose face, whether Khafre's or another's, stares silently across the plateau. But behind their grandeur lies a deeper question. What compelled generations of Egyptians to pour their lives, their labor, and their faith into these immense tombs? Was it fear of the pharaoh, or devotion to him? Was it belief in the eternal cycle, or the promise of their own place in the afterlife? The answer lies somewhere between power and faith, ambition and devotion. The pyramids were not built by one man, but by an entire civilization united under the shadow of eternity. And yet, as the age of the pyramids reached its zenith, the seeds of change began to stir. New rulers, new challenges, new visions of power and faith were rising on the horizon. The desert winds carried whispers of unrest, and the very system that had built these monuments would soon face its first tremors. The question was not whether the pyramids would endure. They would, but whether the kingdom that gave them life could survive the weight of its own creation. The Nile still flowed, eternal and unchanging, but the kingdom around it was beginning to shift. Khufu's successors inherited not only his throne, but also the monumental legacy he had carved into stone. His son Khafre rose to power, determined to rival, if not surpass, the grandeur of his father. Where Khufu had commanded the construction of the Great Pyramid, Khafre sought to leave behind both a pyramid and a guardian of stone that would project his divinity for eternity. Khafre's pyramid, slightly smaller than his father's, was built with equal precision. The base was nearly as vast, and its summit, though lower, sat on higher ground, creating the illusion that it stood equal in height. Khafre was no fool. He understood the psychology of perception, and in stone he crafted the image of a king whose power did not wane after Khufu. His pyramid was encased in gleaming limestone, its capstone glinting in the sun. But it was the monument before it that would haunt history. The Sphinx, carved directly from the bedrock of the Giza Plateau. The Sphinx rose with the body of a lion and the face of a pharaoh. Scholars believe the face to be Khafre's own, its gaze fixed eastward, watching the rising sun each dawn. To the Egyptians, this was no mere sculpture. The lion's body symbolized power and guardianship, while the human face proclaimed divine kingship. The Sphinx embodied the pharaoh as both protector and god, a silent sentinel of the necropolis. For millennia it has endured sandstorms and time, its face weathered but its aura intact. Yet even here, the mystery deepens. No inscription names Khafre as its builder. No text confirms its purpose. It simply exists, colossal and silent, daring future generations to interpret its meaning. Khafre's reign, like his father's, demanded immense resources. Stone was quarried, blocks transported, thousands fed and organized. But he also presided over a kingdom that was both strong and vulnerable. The unity of Egypt depended on the pharaoh's ability to embody Ma'at, the principle of cosmic order, balance, and justice. If Ma'at faltered, chaos threatened. And chaos, to the Egyptians, was more than political unrest. It was the unraveling of the universe itself. The pyramids were therefore not only tombs but instruments of Ma'at, keeping chaos at bay by ensuring the pharaoh's eternal rebirth. Yet even as Khafre's pyramid rose, dissent lingered beneath the surface. The burden of constant building strained the kingdom's resources. While the pyramids symbolized immortality, they consumed the labor of tens of thousands, draining wealth that might have gone to temples, provinces, and people. Still, the pharaohs pressed on. Menkaure, Khafre's son, would construct the smallest of the three great pyramids. Though modest in scale compared to its predecessors, it was clad in expensive granite, a costly statement that perhaps sought to emphasize quality over size. Menkaure's reign was remembered as more benevolent, his justice praised in Egyptian tradition. Unlike Khufu's harsh reputation, Menkaure's legacy suggested a ruler who balanced ambition with compassion. But history does not move in a straight line. With each successive pyramid, the grandeur diminished. After the Fourth Dynasty, Egypt continued to build pyramids, but none would match the scale of Giza. Why? The reasons were many. The economic strain was immense. The centralized power required to marshal such vast projects began to weaken. The people's faith in pyramid building as the ultimate vessel of immortality began to shift. And so, slowly, the golden age of the Great Pyramids faded, leaving Giza as it zenith, never again equaled. Still, the pyramids remained more than monuments. They became symbols of the pharaoh's divine role, reminders of Egypt's golden power. Priests performed rituals. Offerings were made to sustain the spirit of the dead kings. The mortuary temples, connected to the pyramids by long causeways, were centers of worship and continuity. The pharaohs lived on not only in stone, but in ritual. Their souls believed to ascend to the shaft of their pyramids into the heavens above. Outside Egypt, the world shifted as well. To the south, Nubia watched its northern neighbor with both awe and ambition. To the east, trade routes carried cedar from Lebanon, copper from Sinai, and precious goods from distant lands. Egypt was not isolated. It was a hub of commerce, diplomacy, and sometimes war. The pyramids, visible for miles across the desert, were not only tombs but declarations of power to all who entered the Nile Valley. They said, "Here stands a civilization unshaken, led by kings who are gods, builders of eternity." But eternity has a way of unraveling. Centuries later, when the old kingdom began to falter, the pyramids themselves became targets. Their treasures, once buried with the pharaohs, lured thieves in the dead of night. Robbers tunneled into their cores, breaking through granite, prying open chambers. By the time later dynasties rose, most pyramids had been plundered, their gold gone, their sarcophagi desecrated. Even Khufu's great tomb was found empty. The pyramids, for all their might, could not protect their king's bodies forever. And yet, paradoxically, the pyramids gained a different kind of immortality. Though robbed, though weathered, though stripped of their gleaming casing stones, they remained. In a world where entire empires would rise and fall, the pyramids stood unbroken. They became silent witnesses to Egypt's own decline, to invasions, to centuries of change. And as foreign rulers came, the Hyksos, the Persians, the Greeks, they, too, looked upon the pyramids in awe. When Herodotus, the Greek historian, visited Egypt in the 5th century BCE, the pyramids were already over 2,000 years old. To him, they were relics of a mythical past, and he wove tales of Khufu's cruelty and excess. His stories painted a dramatic picture of women sold into servitude, of endless suffering. Whether true or exaggerated, they shaped how the pyramids were remembered by outsiders. Even today, much of the Western imagination of Egypt's past comes through the lens of Herodotus's writings. The pyramids became not only monuments of Egypt, but symbols of mystery to the wider world. And the mysteries multiplied. Why were they aligned so precisely with the stars? Why were their proportions so exact, their dimensions so carefully calculated? The Egyptians left no blueprints, no detailed records of the engineering methods. What remains of the stones themselves, silent and unyielding, daring future generations to solve their riddles. Even today, engineers debate the exact methods used. Ramps, levers, sledges. Yes, but the sheer coordination, the organizational genius, still astonishes. The pyramids were not miracles, but they were achievements at the very edge of human possibility, reached by will, vision, and faith. As centuries passed, Egypt moved on. The capital shifted south to Thebes. New temples rose to gods like Ammonius, and the age of pyramid building gave way to the Valley of the Kings, where tombs were hidden rather than proclaimed. But the pyramids of Giza did not fade. They loomed eternal, reminders of a time when kings dared to build immortality in stone. Priests still tended to their temples. Pilgrims still came to leave offerings, and generations of Egyptians still looked upon them as anchors of their history. But a new force was rising that would test Egypt's endurance in ways stone alone could not withstand. Political divisions began to deepen. Provincial governors grew stronger, and the centralized authority that once commanded pyramid builders began to weaken. The old kingdom would fracture, plunging Egypt into its first great age of turmoil. And as famine spread, and as the Nile's floods failed, the people would ask a dangerous question. Had the pharaohs, those god kings, lost their divine favor? The same monuments that once symbolized eternal power now stood as silent accusations, reminders of rulers who had demanded everything from their people, only to leave them to face chaos alone. The Nile, once steady in its blessing, betrayed the land. Its floods, the heartbeat of Egypt's survival, faltered. Years passed when the river rose too little, leaving the fields parched, crops withered, and granaries empty. Hunger spread like a shadow, striking peasants first, then merchants, and finally even the officials who had once feasted in plenty. In the silence of want, the unshakable certainty of divine kingship began to crack. If the pharaoh was a god, if he held the balance of Mot, then how could such suffering be allowed? Whispers turned to doubt, and doubt to anger. This was the first intermediate period, a time when Egypt unraveled. The centralized authority that had commanded the building of pyramids collapsed. Provincial governors, once loyal servants of the throne, now clung to their local power. They raised militias, controlled food, and declared independence. For centuries, the voice of a single pharaoh had ruled the two lands. Now, Egypt splintered into dozens of voices, each demanding loyalty, each striving to survive. The pyramids of the old kingdom still towered over the desert, but their meaning began to shift. Once, they were the stairways of kings ascending to the gods. Now, to the starving masses, they stood as hollow monuments to rulers who had drained the land for their own eternity, only to leave their descendants powerless against famine and chaos. The gleaming casing stones still caught the sun, but for many Egyptians, they burned as symbols of vanity rather than divinity. And yet, even in collapse, Egypt's spirit endured. Inscriptions from this age speak of despair, but also of resilience. One text, known as the Admonitions of a Pure, laments a world turned upside down, servants ruling, the poor becoming rich, chaos reigning in every corner. But hidden within its laments lies a hope that Ma could be restored, that a strong ruler could reunify the land and bring order once more. In time, that hope was realized. A line of kings rose in Thebes, far to the south, men who claimed not only political power but divine legitimacy. They spoke of restoring Egypt to the glory of its ancestors, invoking the memory of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure not as tyrants but as beacons of stability. Slowly, war by war, alliance by alliance, Egypt was reunified. The Middle Kingdom was born, and with it came a new vision of kingship. No longer would the pharaohs build pyramids of such colossal scale. They still raised tombs, but more modest, more hidden. The lessons of the old kingdom had been learned. Too much wealth poured into stone left the kingdom fragile, vulnerable to famine and unrest. Instead, the kings of the Middle Kingdom poured resources into irrigation, agriculture, and defense. They sought not only to glorify themselves, but to strengthen the land. The memory of the great pyramids remained, but their time had passed. And yet, the pyramids never ceased to cast their spell. Even as new dynasties rose, the plateau of Giza remained sacred. Pilgrims came to leave offerings, priests maintained the mortuary temples, and the structures themselves became entwined with myth. To later Egyptians, they were not only the tombs of long-dead kings, but symbols of the eternal link between heaven and earth. Stories began to swirl around them. Tales of magic, of hidden chambers, of secrets guarded by the gods themselves. By the time of the New Kingdom, Egypt had entered another golden age. Pharaohs like Thutmose III, Amenhotep III, and Ramesses II expanded the empire's reach across the Levant and Nubia. They raised colossal temples at Karnak and Luxor, filled with obelisks and statues. But still, the pyramids of Giza remained unmatched, their stones weathered but defiant. Great kings visited them, marveled at them, and sought to align themselves with their legacy. Thutmose IV, in particular, left his mark upon the Sphinx. According to an inscription carved between its paws, the dream stele, he had fallen asleep in its shadow and dreamed that the Sphinx, choking under sand, promised him kingship if he would free it. Thutmose ordered the sand cleared, restoring the monument. Whether true or a crafted tale of legitimacy, the stele reveals how deeply the Sphinx and the pyramids were woven into Egypt's spiritual and political fabric. They were not relics. They were living symbols of divine authority. But even symbols cannot remain untouched by time. Centuries later, when foreign powers cast their gaze upon Egypt, the pyramids became both a prize and a puzzle. To the Persians who conquered Egypt, they were trophies of an ancient power now subdued. To Alexander the Great, who marched into Egypt in 332 BCE, they were wonders that testified to the greatness of a land he sought to claim as his own. In their shadow, Alexander was hailed as pharaoh, adopting the mantle of god-king for himself. The Greeks who followed him, the Ptolemies, ruled Egypt for centuries, blending Greek and Egyptian culture. They built great libraries, cities, and temples, but even they bowed to the majesty of the pyramids. They studied them. They speculated about their builders. They tied them to myths of Osiris and Isis, to tales of gods walking the earth. The pyramids became more than tombs. They became the canvas upon which each generation projected its own stories. And when Rome absorbed Egypt, the fascination only deepened. Roman emperors came to gaze upon them, to carve their names into their stones, to marvel at their endurance. They loomed not only as monuments of Egypt, but as monuments of humanity itself. The ancient world began to count them among its wonders, placing them alongside the hanging gardens of Babylon, the statue of Zeus, and the temple of Artemis. But unlike those others, destined to crumble and vanish, the pyramids stood firm, the last and eternal of the seven wonders. Still, the deeper mystery persisted. Why were they so perfectly aligned? Why were they built with such unyielding precision? No other civilization had attempted monuments of this scale with such accuracy. Were they mere tombs or something more? The Egyptians themselves, by the New Kingdom, had lost much of the practical memory of how exactly they were raised. The knowledge had faded into legend. their purpose shrouded in religious symbolism. And so, a veil of mystery fell over them even in antiquity. But histories will continue to turn. Egypt, once the center of the world, became a province, then a memory, and finally a prize for conquerors. The pyramids, however, refused to be forgotten. They survived invasions, earthquakes, and centuries of neglect. But as the old gods faded, as Christianity took root in the land, as Islam later spread across North Africa, the pyramids remained immovable, inscrutable, eternal. And yet, beneath the sand, they were not silent. Secrets still slept within their stones. In the modern age, explorers would come, driven by obsession and wonder, breaking open their sealed chambers, probing their mysteries with torch and chisel. They would peel back the layers of time, sometimes with reverence, sometimes with greed. And in doing so, they would discover both revelations and new enigmas. For what was uncovered inside these tombs was not the final truth, but a deeper riddle. One question above all haunted them. Why was Khufu himself never found within his great pyramid? The desert winds carried that question forward. It would ignite an age of exploration where men risked everything to pierce the heart of eternity itself. When the sands of centuries were finally disturbed, the age of modern discovery began. In 1798, when Napoleon Bonaparte marched into Egypt, he did not bring only soldiers. He brought scholars, engineers, artists, men who would record and study the monuments that had loomed over the desert for millennia. They measured, they sketched, they described, and Europe, enthralled, rediscovered the pyramids through their eyes. For Napoleon's campaign failed militarily, but awakened Egyptology, a science that would grow with relentless passion. The pyramids became a stage where explorers chased immortality of their own. In the 19th century, men like Giovanni Battista Caviglia and Colonel Howard Weiss bored into their stones, blasting through granite with gunpowder, prying open sealed shafts. They sought treasure, they sought mummies, they sought answers. What they found was more subtle. Hidden chambers, intricate passageways, hieroglyphs scrawled by the very work gangs who had raised the blocks. These were not signatures of slaves, but proud teams, leaving behind their names, the friends of Khufu, the drunkards of Menkaure, a human mark etched inside eternal stone. Still, the mystery deepened. In Khufu's great pyramid, the burial chamber was found bare. His sarcophagus remained, carved of granite, but empty. No mummy, no treasure, no wealth of gold. If robbers had struck, they had taken everything. If rituals had failed, perhaps his body had been hidden elsewhere. No proof, only silence. The pharaoh who commanded humanity's greatest tomb remained absent, a ghost king whose presence was everywhere and nowhere. The enigma drove men mad with speculation. Some imagined secret chambers hidden beyond the known passages. Others theorized vast treasures still sealed within. But as archaeology matured, reckless blasting gave way to careful science. In the 20th and 21st centuries, radar, microgravimetry, and infrared scans probed the pyramids without harming them. And indeed, they revealed anomalies, voids, hidden cavities, unexplored spaces. The pyramids, even after 4.5 millennia, still guard secrets within. But if the stones refuse to yield everything, they reveal enough to tell a story both vast and intimate. The pyramids are not miracles. They were built by hands, calloused, blistered, strong. They were planned by minds at calculated angles with tools of wood and string that aligned colossal structures to the stars with nothing more than naked eyes and sharpened wits. They were raised by a people who believed that through labor, through sacrifice, they secured not only their king's eternity, but their own share in the afterlife. Each block is a fragment of their devotion, each scar on their skeletons a testament to their will. And yet, even as science lays bare the human effort, the pyramids refuse to lose their power. They are mathematics in stone, but they are also poetry. They are geometry, but also faith. They are the proof of civilization that looked at the desert, the sky, and the endless river, and dared to carve immortality into their horizon. They are the union of earth and heaven, of man and God, of mortality and eternity. Their legacy is not confined to Egypt. Across the world, they have inspired countless imitations, ziggurats in Mesopotamia, step pyramids in Mesoamerica, monumental tombs from China to Sudan. But none have equaled the perfection of Giza, where form and faith fuse so completely that they still outlast empires. They stand as the last of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the only ones that did not crumble, the only ones that still rise with the sun each morning. And they endure not only in stone but in imagination. Every traveler who has stood before them, from ancient priests to Roman emperors, from Napoleon to modern tourists, has felt the same silence, the same weight of eternity pressing down. They inspire awe. They provoke questions. They awaken the deepest human urge to understand our place in time, to reach beyond death, to leave behind something that will endure when our names are forgotten. But the pyramids are not only the story of kings. They are the story of Egypt itself. They embody the faith of a people who believe in eternity so deeply that they try to build it. They remind us that civilizations rise and fall, that famine comes and kingdoms shatter, but that human vision can carve something that endures against all odds. They are the voice of the old kingdom, echoing across 45 centuries, whispering of a time when men believed they could command the cosmos. And still, the question lingers, the one that has haunted every explorer, every scholar, every dreamer who has stared at their slopes. Why? Why devote generations to raising mountains of stone for a single man's tomb? Why align them so precisely with the stars? Why polish them to shine like suns in the desert? Was it power? Was it faith? Was it fear of chaos? Or was it perhaps the same reason humanity still builds, still dreams, still reaches upward, to defy time, to leave behind proof that we were here? The sands shift, the winds howl, empires fall, but the pyramids remain. Khufu's body is gone, his treasure scattered, his name sometimes cursed and sometimes praised. Yet his pyramid still pierces the sky, unchanged, unbroken, a defiance carved in stone. Khafre still holds the Sphinx in its shadow, staring across eternity. Menkaure, smaller but steadfast, still anchors the triad of immortality. Together, they proclaim not only the might of their builders, but the indomitable spirit of a civilization that dared to build forever. And so the story ends where it began, in silence. The desert stretches unbroken. The Nile flows as it always has. The sun rises and sets on golden horizons. And out of that horizon, 3 titans still rise, daring time itself to erase them. They whisper no secrets, yet they hold them all. They remind us that every stone carries the weight of history, and that sometimes, against all odds, human hands can build eternity.